So it is the first day on Tuesday, coming back after a long weekend, Labor Day weekend, away from the market. Had a nice, weekend spent away with some friends. We went up to Squamish and Whistler and did some outdoorsy activities. It was great fun and really, really much needed break for me to kind of take some time away from the market. But a lot of times what happens is the first day after a long weekend off, sometimes I slip up and I get a little bit too aggressive. So that was the case today on NKLA. I was so determined on the short bias because of, especially after we flushed hard pre-market and then later on at the open we popped a little bit to 48 and we just slammed back down, and this is where I got some very nice covers. I was up really nicely on the day from both the pre-market short as well as the opening short, but instead of once the trend reverses and we are reclaiming VWAP, that should have been the place where I cut the entire trade and reassess for maybe an entry later on. Instead, after the initial two shorts, which was already very nice on the day, I fought it pretty hard and I gave back a majority of my profits on NKLA. I'm definitely not proud about that, but at the end of the day, I still ended green on the ticker because, of course, risk management comes into play, and I never want to turn a green ticker into a red one. Even though I did fight it pretty hard, I did get chopped up on the short side, I still ended green on this. Could have been a lot better if I just, cut it off completely and instead of re-entering the short. Risk management still very important. Gotta manage your risk. Doesn't matter how convicted you are of the short side or the long side. After the re-entry, this is what I covered, and I tried re-enter here. I cut it for the loss, took it. It sucks, but I took the loss. I did get like a small scalp long, but at the same time, the breakout above $50 was so unconvincing. So that's at the same time, the long was just tiny scalp for me. It wasn't a big trade. The breakout above $50 didn't happen until much later on, about 12:30, but I left it alone. I was not here for that part. We'll see what happens tomorrow. They do have above average trading volume, traded about 135 million shares on NKLA, so that's a big deal for a stock like this. They did have some positive news about a deal partnership with GM. When that's gonna kick in and how profitable would that be for NKLA? I think that's the big question here. So tomorrow I think we'll get another trade on this. It's unfortunate that I minimized a trade that could have been really big. So that was my main focus on the day. I had a couple of scalp trades on the short side on these small caps. CLSK, unknown fund that nobody cares about. Who gives a shit if you give the stock a $900 price target when the stock is trading at $9? Like, it doesn't make sense. So that's why it was a short. Essentially, you're shorting the release of news. Sell the news, essentially. Other stock. And some other stock I traded very small on these because the volume is really thin. Yeah, I traded 200K about after the on-hold on the short side, but later on once volume dropped up to like 13K, I don't want to get involved with it. So I had some scalp shorts on these stocks, very similar setup as CLSK, and that's pretty much it. And I also had a loss on Apple. I was trying to long the stock and it did go all the way to 119, but I stopped out right here, pretty much break even on the starter long right at the bottom. So this is what it is. You gotta respect your risk. Sometimes you stop out right at the bottom and the stock just takes off without you. It's okay, it's only a starter size, and now we're gapping down. So we'll see what happens on the rest of the market tomorrow. A pretty non-eventful day. Small caps is slow as usual, like the past 2 weeks. And the large caps, we had some very decent gap ups, like ITCI, a biotech stock. But the overall market was a little bit choppy, to be honest. Like the PTON, the Tesla, the Zoom. We didn't really see a direct clean trend until much later on. ITCI gap up from $18 all the way to a high of 42 and started selling off pre-market. When you have this kind of gap up, and if you look at the daily chart on this day, we played it in December, and we're gapping up to very key daily resistance, right around 42 right here of pre-market. And when the stock started selling off, then I want to join the trend, and that's why pre-market very small size. I started very small pre-market 32 and then added some 33s, covered some into the open, and at the open once was staying really heavy, I shorted at the open right here. Not the best entries, $30, because you see we did pop, and I was prepared if that pop does start reclaiming going higher, I would have cut my losses once we reclaim this level around $31, but we rejected really quick, so I'm okay letting that ride out, and then I added some more into this. In hindsight, I wish I had more size on this, but it's okay. I was out of my first short over here around $29, and I waited for a retest and rejection of the same level that we talked about, $31. Keep on seeing a reject, and that's why I went back in short. I did get stopped out on some small share sizes, but I was able to re-add it back once we create this short-term double top, right, around the $31 mark that we're talking about. So once that resistance keeps on holding, that's why I went back in short. It was getting a little bit choppy, that's why I just covered. I want to look for re-entry if we start consolidating below VWAP, but it kept on holding above VWAP and going higher, so I didn't want to get chopped up any more than I have. I already gave back some in the secondary shorts, but overall not like a home run or anything, but it's decent enough. And KODK, I love the stock. Some options news or something like that spiked to 650s. Ideally, in the perfect world, I thought it was gonna go to $8, so I didn't have much size on these. These are just scalp sizes because I want to be prepared if we do go back to $8, but we didn't, unfortunately. But I was shorting the stock, shorted some here, 340s, added some more, covered some, but I want to add back in. And I did take a loss on the re-add over here. You can see once I added, it spiked back up. This is what I'm thinking to myself, okay, now we're gonna go to 7 and 8. That's what I covered. And once we create this lower high, this very clear rejection and selling candle put in, you see the volume down here. If you look on the 1 minute on the stock, it's even clearer. So that's why this rejection, you can see this 1 minute selling volume. That's why I went back in short. Got some very nice flush to 610s. I didn't get the bottom tick here, but I did cover some 617s, and I was able to hold majority for 605s and 592. So very decent trade. You don't need a lot of size to make money on a stock like this. The other trade that could have been a lot better, but it was actually very choppy. This is what I was talking about earlier, that the large caps were extremely choppy. It was the earnings gap down. The earnings were decent, like it wasn't like an amazing beat, which is what everyone was expecting. But, you know, we did have a gap down, and I did think that, okay, this gap down was a little bit overdone. So once $24 start basing, took a small long pre-market. At the open, I pretty much got out flat. I wanted a clear trend to go on long, but we never really got a clear trend. You can see like these are, even though 2 minute candles is extremely choppy. Goes up, comes back all the way down, goes back up again, but comes back down. It was really choppy to trade, and also SSR was on for the stock. So that might have contributed to some of this kind of chop. But overall, I was long on the stock, but I wasn't able to build any size or anything that I wanted. Break even, small loss, and small wins. So I ended up doing the very, very small winner. So the other stock, Tesla, this one, I had in my mind a big picture going higher, right? Around 11, but it kept on while I was long the stock the whole day. It just kept around midday here, around 10:30, 11. It just couldn't reclaim VWAP, and that's what I was hoping for. I did start adding to a very nice position on the long side to see I want this kind of trend to happen midday. But once we couldn't even break above VWAP when we sold off, I just have to stop out. So the secondary trade on the long side was pretty much break even. I did make some small wins on the long side in early on, a small dip buying around this area, 346s, sold some into the push. Added some more ones who were breaking out and seems really strong, and sold into the spikes. Once, you know, we're kind of wicking here, you can see, right? On the 2 minute candle, lots of wicks around the 365s area. And once that started to break, I just bailed. Decent small profit on Tesla, but looking for this kind of big move much early on. Instead of this, it made a new high, breaks down, makes a new low, but keeps on reclaiming and coming back up. Like this is very choppy for me. I'm not good at trading trading this. So today was definitely not an easy day in terms of the large caps I'm trading. Ironically, the trade that was the least headache was this low float stock, at least for me, YTEN. I was short early on pre-market and then I stopped out on the rest of the position, and I did start shorting on pops. Didn't get any size after the market opens just because I was too busy fighting OSTK and MRNA and a few other trades. So I mean, this one turned out to be pretty straightforward. I was scaling into the pops, right? Ideally get into 840s and even $9. It didn't pop that high. There were a couple of holds, but I was shorting into the spikes, and you can see each spike it tries and fails like time and again. So there's a very clear resistance around 840s, 830s, right? And as long as it holds below it, and there's so much selling volume, I was okay holding it. First of all, the sizing was, I didn't carry much size until much later on, and I had it faded down to 710s and later on 620s. This one turned out to be pretty much stress-free on the short side, but at the same time, I never got any major size on it. The other stock, this one was a headache. MRNA. So this one, same as OSTK. I was short, and the risk management was totally fine. I just had to take a lot of paper cuts. That's unfortunate, right? It's basically death by 1,000 paper cuts. So at the end of the day, MRNA, this trade turned out to be a small red, just because I had to take so many paper cuts to the upside. Because we have a double top here and then failing again. But this part, it did seem like we're really strong. We're going to keep on pushing to the upside to 61, potentially 63s. And we just see this hard rejection right at the top, where I basically covered at the top. So that's very frustrating. And even though I was scaling in slowly, and I didn't have that big of a size in any of the losses, but still, it's still frustrating seeing that I covered right at the top and it just immediately rejected. I did get some, partial shares around 59, 80s, but I got some really nice downside to 59 and then later on 58, 90s. But at the end, this trade turned out to be red, just because you can see I couldn't get chance to scale back in on the short side after the top has confirmed. And even after this fail, it still went back to test the same levels here again too. So it definitely wasn't like an easy trade. OSTK, it's again a really similar setup as MRNA. This one, I was up a lot, had a really nice scale around $80. So I had some really nice scaling, and I was actually in the money, but I should have covered here. Should have covered around 76s. If I had covered, this trade would have been, well, maybe not perfect, but I would have been up nicely. So, I was trying to let it work, trying to see we're going to flush down to 74, 73s, which we did later on, much later on. But unfortunately, I had to cover a majority of my shares for a loss. Again, around $79, and then later on, the final partial shares around 81s. So turned a really nice trade that was green into a loser, unfortunately. I had this tiny scalp at the end of the day, but that was just small. It doesn't really matter. The other stock that I was trading is PTON. This one was a nice breakout play, but it turned out to be just a small winner, just because I was trying to be patient and holding a majority of my size for a breakout to maybe $99, even $100. We definitely had a room for that. Unfortunately, I sold some into 97s. I didn't get to sell at 98.50s, and the stock just tanked. And unfortunately, I did still have some longs. And you can see I did re-enter, and I re-entered it here. It didn't work out. Cut it here and then cut it here. And those were good stop outs, because you can see the stock later tanked with the entire market to $89. So always follow your stop, whether it's a small loss, a decent sized loss, or a small win break even. You just have to follow your stop. It's very important in trading, especially in this kind of market. So STSA, this one, well, this is an interesting one because we gapped down from 23 all the way to $4, and we did get a spike to around 6s, and that's where the stock started going parabolic, and that's why I started going in short. I did thought it was gonna test lows, and that's why I was holding a majority of it, trying to see if we can go back to $5. We didn't get that, but good thing I did cover decent around 560s from an average about 630s. So that's a decent gain here. and I covered on the way up just because I don't want to get caught holding it, because you can see the stock later on went up to $9 and potentially 10. So, I didn't want to get involved with that, and I was out. Okay, so it is Friday, and we have market rolling over right now, but I'm out of most of my positions. So the trades today are pretty straightforward, pretty clean, both on the long side and the short side. The first stock on the day is PTON. I started small, very small pre-market, but I didn't add to bigger size until much later on at the open. And the reason is because market was already, it looks weak. Right out of the open, the market flushed. And even though we did have a good earnings beat on PTON, it wasn't like the numbers weren't like a smash out of the park. And also we were trading around all-time highs. So I just started small pre-market. I did cover for small losers first because I just don't think it was ready yet. But it did start rolling over once we touched hundreds, and that's why I started in again. Added some more. I covered most of the pre-market size right here, I think before the open. And once we flushed, and then I was like, okay, oh my god, I should have just like kept the size and like re-add. And that's what I did. I tried to add on the bounces, and the bounces weren't that big, and that's a very good sign that the stock is weak with the market, right? I scaled in here 46 70s. I added some more here, covered on the way down, but I was trying to re-short on every single pop because there's so much room to the downside. But unfortunately I made it to as low as here 90 60s, and I tried to re-add here, but it did seem like that was the bottom for the day at least, and then I covered. So out on this short trade within 30 minutes. You can see there's so much more to the downside that I'm not involved with, unfortunately. So that was the biggest trade for me on the day. The other stock on the day was BFRA. As usual, some sort of pre-market pump news. I didn't see this until here when I was doing pre-market planning with my chat room, and I saw this $11 push. Had a scalp short pre-market, very nice $11 short entry, covered all the pre-market size at $10 pretty much. And I waited until at the open it starts pushing towards 10s, and then here we're above 10 for a little bit. So this is why I'm starting to scale in short, small size at a time, just because I know there's chat room pumping this, and also the stock was kind of choppy, but I managed my size very well. I didn't start adding bigger until we fail this $10 confirmation around VWAP 2. Once the slam comes in, we see this selling volume, and yeah, we did have some wick here on the buying side, but you can see this volume is clearly lower than this. And once this red candle bar puts in, that's why I know the stock might be done for the day. So this is a pretty straightforward short. I started scaling in here, added some more, but I always leaving more room and more size to add. You don't just go, full size, I don't know, 1,000 shares in. You go in small and add until you have a comfortable size. Covered some around 930s. This is why I was confident I can re-add, because we're failing 950s and we failed $10. Re-added, and I was out. Most of it around 9s. I still have some very small that I'm gonna see, how low it goes till the end of the day. Maybe 820 was the bottom, but we'll see where it goes. The volume is really low, and that's why you don't want to leave too much size if you're holding for like an all-day short. But I'm out most of it. So market seems like we're rolling over, we're breaking the lows from previous days. So I think we're gonna see a lot more downside intraday today. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and the bad jokes. If you want to see more day trading content, make sure to subscribe and follow me on Twitter and Instagram for more. If you'd like to trade with me daily and get my free weekend watch list and trading journal, make sure to check out the links below for more resources. Stay green, stay positive, and I'll see you guys next time.